My husband Robert Miller and I lived as double income, no kids dinks for most of our lives. Just as I turned 55 and retired, planning to start enjoying life, he brought a young woman before me, Sarah. Jessie is pregnant, and we plan to have the baby. But don't worry, I won't divorce you. Jessie is still in school, and she'll need your help with the baby after it's born. Don't you think I should bring Jessie home as soon as possible for her pregnancy? I remembered how, when I was pregnant back then, he used every means to force me to get an abortion. After that, he even forced me to get an UD and wouldn't let me remove it even when my body rejected it, which eventually led to my uterus being removed. It turned out he did want children, he just didn't want them with me. I had seen this girl before. She was one of Professor Miller's graduate students and had eaten at our house a few times. Professor Miller often talked about her. Before, I just thought he appreciated her talent. But I never expected this. Looking at the gray-haired, self-righteous man in front of me, I couldn't help but sneer. So you mean while my friends are enjoying their grandchildren, I'm supposed to raise your son? I was always meek and mild. In 35 years of marriage, I'd never even argued with Robert Miller. Stung by my words, his face turned bright red, unsure how to respond. Jessica Davis, sitting beside him, instantly teared up. Mrs. Miller, you don't need to be so harsh. Professor Miller is highly respected, and his influence extended far and wide through his students. How can you bear to let his lineage end? You can't just forbid Professor Miller from having his own child just because you can't have one. Mrs. Miller, that's incredibly selfish. Seeing Jessie get emotional, Robert Miller poured a glass of warm water and brought it to her lips. Jessie, don't get upset. It's not good for our baby. You're early in your pregnancy. Your mood is what matters most. I watched with a cold eye, finding the two of them utterly ridiculous. The girl was filled with righteous indignation, every word accusing me of the fault of being childless after many years of marriage. But what she didn't know was this: when we first got married, it was Robert Miller who insisted he didn't want children, wanting only to devote himself to his educational career. I loved children, but for the sake of harmony in our home, I had to cooperate with his various methods of contraception. Unfortunately, things don't always go as planned. In our 4th year of marriage, I became pregnant. I remember sharing the news with Robert Miller. Overjoyed, I thought that even if he didn't like children, he would surely change his mind once he knew I was pregnant. To my surprise, he just said coldly, "Get rid of it while it's still small. I told you, I don't want children in this life." Still unwilling to give up, I shared my physical changes with him every day and even bought books on prenatal education for him to read with me. But when I was suffering from severe morning sickness, he just said coldly, "Sarah, you brought this on yourself." Then he left me and moved into the school dormitory by himself. I begged him outside the dorm door to come home, but he just said resolutely, "Unless you get rid of the child, I won't come home." That era was relatively conservative, and rumors about us getting divorced started spreading more and more. Unable to bear the pressure, I went and had the surgery alone. I lay in the hospital bed, silently crying. When Robert Miller finally came to see me, he gently wiped away my tears and said, "Sarah, a person's heart is so small. Wouldn't it be better if my heart held only you? Once we have a child, the love between us will eventually be worn away by the mundane realities of life." At the time, I thought he loved me desperately, which is why I endured immense pressure from our elders for so many years to be double income, no kids dink with him. But it turned out he got his student pregnant when he was nearing 50. Lost in my memories, I said nothing. Robert Miller patted Jessica Davis's hand reassuringly. "You should go back now, Jessie. Your Mrs. Miller is very reasonable. I'll talk to her alone." Jessica Davis nodded obediently and turned to leave our house. Robert Miller handed me a list. "This is a list of Jessie's favorite foods and some things she needs to avoid. Memorize it and don't get it wrong. Jessie is still young and it's her first pregnancy, so there will be things she doesn't know. Take good care of her when she moves in." His tone was harsh. He clearly had no intention of discussing this with me. I curved my lips into a smile. I've never had a child myself. How would I know how to care for a pregnant woman? Robert Miller frowned impatiently. "Sarah, you've lived for most of your life. Even if you haven't done it yourself, you've seen others do it. Our house is so big, with so many empty rooms. There's absolutely no problem with one more person living here. I know you're upset right now. I've already discussed it with Jessie, and when the baby is born, you'll be the godmother. You won't have to go through the pain of childbirth and you'll have a child to care for you in your old age. Isn't that good?" His words made me laugh with anger. Just as I was about to retort, his phone rang. From the other end came Jesse's affected voice. Professor Miller, I suddenly have a terrible pain in my lower abdomen. Can you take me to the hospital? Robert Miller put on his jacket, threw out a harsh word about, this is all your fault for giving Jessie a hard time and making her leave. If anything happens to the baby, you'll regret it, and hurried out of the house. I was left alone in the house. I sat on the sofa until the living room was completely dark before slowly getting up. Robert Miller and I were introduced by our parents. He was refined and gentle, with a respectable job. When I was young, I couldn't resist his charm at all. Over the years, while we weren't passionately in love, we lived together with mutual respect. But I never imagined Robert Miller would give me such a gift for my 55th birthday. Perhaps I had never truly known this man. His study was usually locked, and I respected his privacy, never going inside today. He left in a hurry, and the study door was slightly ajar. Hesitating for a moment, I pushed the study door open and went in. On the desk was a yellowed photo album. Turning through the pages, I found they were all photos of Robert Miller and a woman. Coincidentally, the woman in the photos had a pair of foxy eyes with a small red mole at the outer corner, and her features were 7 or 8 parts similar to Jessica Davis. At the end of the album was a 10-page letter. My dearest Eleanor, since you left, I haven't stopped thinking about you today. I marry Sarah at my parents' command, but I have no feelings for her. I will keep our promise and not have any children with her. You can rest assured. There was another letter that looked brand new, likely written recently. My dearest Eleanor, I met a girl named Jessica Davis who looks very much like you. It must be you couldn't bear to leave me and came back for me, right? Now we have our own child, finally fulfilling my lifelong wish. In that moment, the truth was revealed, and I finally understood why he had been so insistent on forcing me to have an abortion back then. And why, after my abortion, he urged me to get an UD. The UD rejected my body, but he sweet-talked me and wouldn't let me take it out. This led to a severe infection in my 42nds, requiring me to have a hysterectomy. It turned out for all these decades, I had just been a foolish woman, loving him one-sidedly. I put down the photo album and looked along the bookshelf. Displayed there were rows of small, purely handmade items. Each piece was as smooth as new, showing how carefully they had been preserved. Each item was labeled, paper anniversary gift for Eleanor, silver anniversary gift for Eleanor. I gave a bitter laugh. After so many years of marriage, he had never even given me a single flower. I had always thought it was because he was practical and not romantic, and I never minded. It turned out that in his heart, for these 35 years, only the deceased Eleanor was his wife. He wasn't incapable of romance. He just didn't want to bother with me. What are you doing? Who allowed you into my study? A furious roar came from behind me. I was startled, and the crystal figurine I was holding fell to the floor. The crystal shattered everywhere. Robert Miller ran over and knocked me to the ground. My palm landed on the fragments, and blood immediately gushed out. I couldn't help but cry out in pain, while he just knelt there, looking heartbroken at his shattered creation, muttering to himself, Eleanor, I'm sorry, I'll definitely replace it for you. In that instant, what shattered was also my heart. I stopped looking at him, turned, pushed open the study door, and walked out. On the sofa, Jessica Davis watched me with a worried expression. Mrs. Miller? Professor Miller is getting old and has high blood pressure. Please be more considerate and don't upset him anymore. Giving Jessica Davis a cold look as she sat on the sofa, I went out and hailed a cab to the hospital to get my hand treated. I had made up my mind. I was leaving Robert Miller. I contacted the tenants renting my apartment and told them I wouldn't be renewing their lease when it expired next month. The tenants happened to be leaving the city anyway, so they readily agreed to move out. This apartment was given to me by my workplace originally, after I married Robert Miller. He wanted me to sell this small place. Fortunately, I had kept my wits about me and only rented it out. Then I contacted Robert Miller's mother, who lived in the family home. Mom, I have great news. The Miller family is going to have a grandchild. Because I had had an abortion back then and hadn't gotten pregnant again since, Robert's mother absolutely hated me and declared I wasn't allowed to go back to the family home with Robert Miller until I had a child. So I immediately told her the good news and invited her to come and live with us. Jessica Davis is only 23 after all, and I don't have any experience with childbirth. Robert Miller's baby is hard won. I can only feel at ease if you come and take care of things. As soon as Robert's mother heard that a young girl was pregnant with Robert Miller's child, she immediately became spirited and declared, I knew it. The reason there hasn't been a child for so many years is because there's something wrong with you. I didn't argue. Just quietly booked her train ticket. When I got home, Robert Miller was sitting on the sofa, his face grim. Where have you been? You didn't answer your phone. It's so late. Jesse is feeling nauseous from hunger. I held up my bandaged hand. Sorry, I injured my hand. You'll have to sort out dinner yourselves. He seemed to just remember I was injured. He came over, looking concerned. Are you okay, Sarah? I'm sorry. I overreacted just now. But you really shouldn't invade my privacy. Yes. I'm sorry. It was indeed my fault. He seemed prepared for me to question him about who Eleanor was, but I straightforwardly admitted my mistake, which made him flustered instead. As I was about to go back to my room, he stopped me, stammering. The master bedroom has a bigger window and is better ventilated for a pregnant woman. How about you sleep in the guest room? Oh, all right. I nodded coldly. To my surprise, he handed me his phone, blushing. I want to buy a box of that kind of medicine, but I don't know how to use the food delivery app. Looking at the name of the medicine, I couldn't believe my eyes. They were enhancement pills. I had originally planned to remind him that it's easy to miscarry in early pregnancy. On second thought, what did it matter to me? So I took the phone and placed the order for him. That night, Jessica Davis deliberately made loud noises next door. Although I already knew about their relationship, the thought of a pregnant girl in her 20s next door, and the two of them making love on the bedding set I had bought, still made me feel a wave of nausea. Early the next morning, I went out. I went to the breakfast place I'd wanted to try for a long time, then enrolled in Latin dance and flower arrangement classes at the Senior Learning Center, something I'd always wanted to learn when I was younger. I remembered how Robert Miller had been strongly against me liking Latin dance, simply because he said, men and women hugging each other while dancing is immoral, so I never danced again, and because he had allergic rhinitis, I hadn't kept any flowers since marrying him. After accommodating him for decades, I was finally about to regain my freedom. Inwardly, I felt more anticipation than fear. For lunch, I met with a lawyer. Although I didn't want to make a big scene in my middle age, I wasn't going to let anyone take what was rightfully mine. When I returned home in the evening, I found the house was already in utter chaos. Robert Miller was sitting on the sofa, comforting Jessica Davis, who had red eyes. Robert's mother was lying on the floor, throwing a tantrum. This old woman, kindly made soup for my future grandchild. Not only did you refuse to eat it, you even threw the bowl. You're so ungrateful. Robert Miller was dizzy from the noise. As he tried to help Robert's mother up, he explained, Mom, we have to be scientific. The baby's gender is determined scientifically. How can you believe in some folk remedy and put pigeon droppings in the chicken soup? I won't listen. I won't listen. I gave birth to you using this folk remedy. Why could this old woman, drink it to have a son, but she can't? Saying this, she jumped up, went into the kitchen, and brought out a bowl of soup, pushing it towards Jessica Davis again. Jessica Davis looked at the strangely colored soup, turned away, and started vomiting violently. For a moment, Robert's mother's curses echoed to the heavens. I had no desire to watch this farce any longer, so I turned and went back to my room. The tenants happened to call and told me they were leaving early, so I could pick up the apartment keys tomorrow. Turning around, Robert Miller was standing behind me at some point, his face pale. Sarah, moving? Where are you moving to? I tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, having no intention of telling him the truth. My friend is moving tomorrow and asked me to help. You must have misunderstood. His expression relaxed slightly. I need to discuss something with you. I don't drive. Can you help me take Mom back to the family home? I shrugged. Of course, as long as Robert's mother is willing to leave, I can take her back tomorrow. He sighed in relief and turned to find Robert's mother. Sure enough, loud wailing soon came from the living room. Robert's mother was crying. A son grows up and is no longer controlled by his mother. I suffered for most of my life. How did I raise such an ungrateful wretch who always takes her side? And a university professor. My foot. He's just an unworthy descendant. Robert Miller was used to being respected. He hadn't been cursed at like this for decades. Unable to withstand Robert's mother's cursing now, he could only turn to persuade his beloved to just endure it, having no desire to listen any further. I put on my earphones and slept soundly. The next morning, Robert Miller was already sitting on the sofa early. He probably hadn't slept well the night before. He looked listless. He tried to please me, pulling at the hem of my clothes. Sarah, why don't you help me talk to Mom? It's fine for her to enjoy her retirement here in the city, but she shouldn't interfere too much with my and Jesse's life. Robert Miller had very low emotional intelligence. For the past few decades, all his interpersonal relationships relied on me mediating. Now that his mother and his new wife couldn't get along, he shamelessly came to me for help. Sorry, I have to help a friend move today, remember? I evaded his attempt to grab my hand. After getting the apartment keys, I excitedly searched for renovation ideas on my phone, then measured and drew up plans myself. For the first time in my life, I experienced the feeling of being in charge, with no one telling me what to do. After finishing the drawings, I found a reliable renovation company recommended by a friend, and we quickly settled on the plan. Not wanting to go home and face those annoying people, I also conveniently booked myself a flight, planning to travel for a month. I was packing my suitcase when I got home. Robert Miller walked into the guest room, looking exhausted. Jessie has a prenatal checkup tomorrow, and I have a lecture I can't miss. Can you go with her? Can't you see I'm packing my suitcase? I've booked a flight and I'm going away for a month. I figured, when I came back in a month, my little place would be renovated. Then I could just go our separate ways with Robert Miller. As soon as he heard I was going on a trip, he exploded like a cat whose tail had been stepped on. Sarah, how can you be so selfish? It's bad enough you won't help Jessie with the discomfort of pregnancy, but you won't even go with her for her checkup? What kind of behavior is that? I laughed with anger. Robert Miller, Jessica Davis is carrying your child. You didn't ask for my permission when you slept together. Why should I be responsible? How can you speak so vulgarly? He was so angry his face turned bright red and he had to take several heart medication pills to calm down. Do you believe that if you leave, this home will never welcome you back? He threatened viciously. Too lazy to argue with him further, I just said, whatever, and pushed him out of my room, stepping onto my journey, breathing the air of freedom. I felt an exhilaration I'd never known before. In my hand, I held a small notebook, listing 100 things I had always wanted to do but never dared to over the years. The first thing was to find a famous plastic surgery clinic abroad and get a slight adjustment to my chin and nose. When I was with Robert Miller, I barely wore any makeup. Whenever I made a slight effort to dress up, he would always tell me, "That's just how you are. No amount of dressing up will help." Or say, "I'm a renowned professor. If you dress up flashy, it'll just look vulgar and won't be suitable for me." After my face swelling went down, I found an image consulting studio. They gave me a complete makeover, from my hairstyle to my clothes. After about half a month of transformation, when I stood in front of the mirror again, I had become the confident and vibrant woman I was in my youth. After finalizing the itinerary for the next few days, I found a freelance photographer named Daniel to follow me and take pictures. When I went to the beach, I put on a very sexy bikini. With Daniel's compliments, I took many photos. Looking at my smooth, fair stomach, I suddenly thought perhaps it was a good thing Robert Miller didn't want me to have children for him. On a whim, I copied the younger generation and posted 9 photos on my social media feed. Unexpectedly, just a few minutes after I posted it, my phone started ringing non-stop. Robert Miller's furious shouting was deafening. "Sarah, you're an old woman, aren't you ashamed? Parading yourself around like that. Who are you trying to impress? Oh, well, not for you anyway." With that, I decisively hung up and blocked Robert Miller. Daniel, worried I was upset, comforted me. "Don't be sad, sis. Your husband doesn't appreciate you." I smiled brightly. "Not my husband. My soon-to-be ex-husband." Daniel let out a whistle. "Sis, I think you're really cool. I'm free for the next few days anyway. Let me show you around. It's on the house." When Robert Miller called again, I was getting a tattoo. Sarah, you're coming back soon, aren't you? My life is really inconvenient without you." I had already heard about his so-called inconvenience from another one of his students. Robert Miller was completely helpless when it came to daily life in the past. I had always ironed his shirts and suits and coordinated his ties and socks for him. As for Jessica Davis, she didn't care at all what Robert Miller wore. Recently, Robert Miller had been mocked behind his back many times at his lectures because his dressing was so mismatched. Even more absurdly, Robert Miller asked Jessica Davis to put his blood pressure medication in his portable pill box. Jessica Davis packed it with sleeping pills instead. After taking a few pills, he fell unconscious at school. His colleagues were so scared they quickly called 911 and had him taken to the hospital. I just smiled after hearing this. To Robert Miller, I wasn't a partner to spend the rest of his life with. I was more like a personal caretaker he couldn't bear to let go of after decades of marriage. My mind wandered as I listened to Robert Miller rambling on the other end. Ow, my ankle stung a bit from the tattoo. I couldn't help but let out a little sound. Daniel knelt down on one knee, blowing gently on my ankle while saying, "Hang in there, sis. It's almost done." "What are you doing? Why is there another man with you?" Robert Miller demanded furiously. He clearly misunderstood what I was doing, but I didn't want to explain it to him. "I'm not coming back yet. If you need anything, ask Jessica Davis." Too annoyed to listen to him ramble on, I quickly hung up. By the time the renovation company called to tell me the apartment was ready, I had been traveling for almost 2 months. Booking a flight back home, I returned leisurely. As soon as I pushed open the door, I smelled a strange odor. Jessica Davis, looking haggard and heavily pregnant, was confronting Robert's mother, who was full of fighting spirit. "You can't cook yourself, and you won't let this old woman cook either. Feeding my grandson food from the food delivery app every day. What kind of nonsense is that? You keep putting strange things in the food. How am I supposed to eat that? If you want to poison me, just say so." Robert Miller, caught in the middle, was covered in sweat. "Stop arguing, both of you. I'll cook, okay?" He hadn't lifted a finger for decades. I really wanted to see what he could cook. By the time Robert Miller finally smelled the burning and realized the water in the pot had boiled dry, flames were already leaping up. In an instant, there was Jessica Davis's scream, Robert's mother's shouting. The kitchen was a scene of utter chaos. I stood at the doorway, having seen enough of the spectacle. I decisively grabbed the fire extinguisher from the cabinet and put out the fire. Ending the farce, Robert Miller's face lit up excitedly. "Sarah, you're back." Seeing how much I had changed from before, his eyes lit up with surprise. You're different." Feeling his unusual enthusiasm towards me, a flicker of jealousy crossed Jessica Davis's eyes, and she grabbed Robert Miller's arm. "Professor Miller, I was so scared just now. My stomach hurts a little. I feel the baby moving so much." Unexpectedly, Robert Miller, who used to worry terribly about even the slightest discomfort Jessica Davis felt, brushed her hand away. "How can you feel the baby move at 3 months? I'm starting to worry the child will inherit your intelligence." It seemed Jessica Davis was experiencing Robert Miller's sarcasm for the first time. She couldn't help but run back to the bedroom with red eyes. However, Robert Miller had no reaction, just stared straight at me. Robert's mother saw my unusually modern attire and came forward, pushing me. "You little troublemaker. Where did you run off to enjoy yourself? My son's money isn't just pocket change, you know? You're just wasting it like crazy." Just as I was about to retort, Robert Miller stepped in front of me and roared, "Sarah is my wife. She can spend my money however she wants." "Mom, it's none of your business. You've stayed here long enough. Now that Sarah is back, Jessie also has someone to take care of her. Go back to the family home today." After saying that, he quickly booked a ticket back to the village for Robert's mother and immediately helped her pack her suitcase. I couldn't help but be surprised. In the past, whenever I clashed with his mother, he would always tell me to be patient, citing how difficult it was for his mother to raise him alone. This was the first time he had ever taken my side. After seeing Robert's mother off, only the two of us were left in the living room. He embraced me with a tender expression. "Sarah, it's so good you're back. I didn't realize how much I missed you until you left." If it were the old me, hearing him express his love so directly would have brought tears to my eyes, but at that moment, there was still another woman lying in our bedroom, and his study was filled with his nostalgic memories of years gone by. I wasn't touched at all. I only felt sarcasm. Hearing that Robert's mother had been sent away, Jessica Davis pushed open the door, her face full of joy. I had expected her to be angry seeing Robert Miller hugging me, but to my surprise, she said tearfully, "I'm so happy to see Mrs. Miller and Professor Miller making up. Jessie felt really guilty thinking she caused unhappiness between you." Robert Miller chuckled. "Jessie, it's wonderful that you think that way. After all, the three of us will be living together for a long time." "Robert Miller, we're getting a divorce." I interrupted Robert Miller's fantasy of having his ideal arrangement living with both women. I took out the divorce agreement drafted by the lawyer from my bag. "Here's the divorce agreement. Read it over, and if you have no issues, sign it quickly." Robert Miller was utterly shocked. "Sarah, divorce? No, I won't agree. I'm already so old. Getting a divorce now? What will my colleagues and students think of me?" He started shouting excitedly. "You got your student pregnant, and you're still worried about what others think of you." I couldn't help but sneer. "I don't agree. I'll never divorce you in this lifetime." Robert Miller tore the divorce agreement into pieces. Jessica Davis started trying to manipulate me again. Mrs. Miller, you really don't have to do this. I genuinely admire Professor Miller and don't care about trivial things like status. No matter what people outside say about me, I just want to leave an heir for Professor Miller. That's all. I don't want to replace you. Hearing Jessica Davis being so considerate of him, Robert Miller was moved and held her hand, then looked at me with a look of deep pain. Sarah, you're such an old woman now. Why aren't you as clear-headed as Jesse? I sighed. I had once been blinded by his profound knowledge. I had deliberately ignored his selfishness and meanness. Now that I no longer loved him, I realized how blind I had been back then, precisely because I've reached this age. I don't want to force myself to live a life I don't like anymore. Robert Miller, I genuinely want to divorce you. Tomorrow I'll have someone come and pack up my things and send them to my new place. I won't be coming back here again. He lifted his head high, looking at me arrogantly. Sarah, don't come crying back to me begging for forgiveness in a couple of days. That's right, in the past. If he so much as frowned, I would patiently coax him for ages, but that was all in the past. As I was getting into Daniel's car, Robert Miller suddenly rushed out and stood in front of it. Sarah, get out of the car and tell me who this man is, he demanded loudly, banging on the hood. I got out of the car and said patiently, we're already divorced. You have no right to interfere with my life. Unexpectedly, he wouldn't let it go. Oh, so that's it. You found yourself a toy boy. No wonder you were so determined to divorce me. You're practically halfway to the grave and you're still acting like a young person, living so wild. Aren't you afraid of getting a dirty disease? Before I could say anything, Daniel got out of the car and knocked Robert Miller to the ground with a punch. Clean your mouth out. Robert Miller sneered repeatedly. Did I say something wrong? Sarah, dare you say there's nothing inappropriate going on between you two? Daniel grabbed his collar and punched him in the face again. You were blind as a bat and didn't appreciate a woman as wonderful as Sis. But you won't let other men admire her? Enough. I stopped Daniel's hand, which was raised for another punch, and said, let's go, Sarah. I'm warning you, if you get dirty, I won't want you back, you second-hand goods. As the car sped away, I could still hear Robert Miller's desperate shouts. Daniel subtly glanced at my expression out of the corner of his eye, then cautiously asked, are you angry, Sis? Yes, I am very angry. His expression visibly fell. I'm angry at myself for being so blind as to fall in love with him in the first place. Hearing I wasn't angry about him hitting Robert Miller, his expression immediately brightened. The next second, he pulled the car over to the side of the road and suddenly looked at me seriously. Sis, actually, he wasn't entirely wrong about one thing. I do want to have an inappropriate relationship with you. I like you. I've never felt such a strong pull towards any woman before. Actually, when I was at a clinic abroad, I had already vaguely sensed Daniel's feelings for me, but I pretended not to notice, thinking that once we were separated by distance, his temporary infatuation would fade. To my surprise, he followed me straight back to my hometown. I looked him calmly in the eyes and said frankly, this might be a little hurtful, Daniel, but I'm not interested in you. If I had a child, they would probably be about your age now. Daniel was 32 this year, a full 23 years younger than me. Hearing my rejection, he wasn't discouraged. Well, do you hate me, Sis? Of course not. I had a wonderful time during our trip together. I told him honestly. See, that's all that matters. As long as you don't hate me, it means I still have a chance. If he were a puppy, HB wagging his tail at me right now, I chuckled, unable to speak, and didn't try to dissuade him further. All I could do was stay true to myself, but his determination was strong. He simply rented an apartment right next door to mine and moved in. Sis, I'm a freelance photographer. I can work anywhere. Wherever you are, Sis, that's where it'll be. He seemed prepared for a long-term pursuit, knowing I went to the senior learning center every day. He even signed up for the same classes as me. Clumsy as he was, through his own efforts, he became my Latin dance partner. Life became busy and fulfilling. I would have been even happier if Robert Miller hadn't kept making excuses to avoid getting the divorce papers. On the weekend, our dance group had a performance at the mall. After coming down from the stage, I suddenly heard a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Sarah, is that you? Looking up, Robert Miller and Jessica Davis were standing in front of us. Compared to a month ago, Jessica Davis's figure was even more swollen. Because of her pregnancy, she also had many butterfly-shaped spots on her face. She was becoming increasingly different from the woman in the photos in Robert Miller's study. Seeing me, she said sorely and sarcastically. Mrs. Miller certainly is uninhibited, not even feeling ashamed doing a sensual dance with a man in public. But Robert Miller suddenly slapped her across the face. How dare you speak like that? Where is the respect you should have for your Mrs. Miller? Jessica Davis's face was full of disbelief. Professor Miller, you weren't like this with me before. Robert Miller said impatiently. Jessica Davis, you weren't such an inappropriate woman before either. Jessica Davis ran off, covering her face with her hands. Her eyes red, however. Robert Miller had no reaction, just stared straight at me. Daniel put his arm tightly around my waist. Let's go, sis. Everyone's already left for the dinner we planned. I nodded, intending to walk around Robert Miller, who was blocking my way. But just as I was about to pass him, he grabbed my wrist. Sarah, come home. I know I was wrong, even now. He still thought I was just throwing a tantrum. Robert Miller, don't you understand? The day you brought Jessica Davis home, we could never go back. Ignoring his shattered expression, I turned and walked away decisively. Since that chance encounter, Robert Miller, who used to say he was too busy to say more than a few words to me a day, seemed to have a lot of free time now. He called me several times a day. He even started writing public love letters to me online. I was utterly annoyed and just blocked him. When he wouldn't go to the courthouse with me, I decided to sue for divorce directly. The day I received the divorce certificate divorce papers, I felt lighter than ever before. Just then, my phone started ringing wildly. When I answered, a panicked voice came from the other end. Mrs. Miller, something's happened to Professor Miller. Can you come to the hospital quickly? Thinking of Robert Miller, who had no relatives in this city, I finally softened and went to the hospital. From his student Michael, I learned the whole story. It turned out the baby Jessica Davis was carrying wasn't Robert Miller's at all. It was the child of another graduate student under Robert Miller. Michael grabbed his hair in frustration. It's all my fault. If I hadn't spoken up, Professor Miller wouldn't have forced Jessica Davis to get an induced abortion. Michael and Jessica Davis's boyfriend shared a dorm room. One day, the boy drank too much and couldn't resist bragging about it. Look at all of you. So worried about your futures. I'm not worried at all. You know Jessica Davis, right? The baby she's carrying is actually mine. To help the two of us get a letter of recommendation from Professor Miller, she seduced him and pretended to be pregnant with his child. As soon as we successfully apply for our doctorates, she's going to go her separate ways with that old man. Michael was furious when he heard this, afraid Robert Miller wouldn't believe him. He even recorded it. Robert Miller, upon learning the truth, was blinded by rage. Ignoring Jessica Davis's pleas, he immediately dragged her to the hospital for an induced abortion and quickly broke up with her. But he never expected that Jessica Davis's family wasn't easy to deal with either. At Robert Miller's retirement party, Jessica Davis's father burst in with a group of people and beat Robert Miller until he was covered in blood, and Jessica Davis, holding evidence of Robert Miller's misconduct with a female student, reported him publicly. Now Robert Miller was still in the emergency room when he got out. Knowing his future was ruined and he was disgraced in his retirement, I wondered if he would be so angry H just die. After hearing the whole dramatic story, I left a money envelope. Thank you for staying here. I'll contact Robert Miller's mother and have her come to the hospital as soon as possible. Get him a caregiver nursing aide later. I'm going home now. Michael asked anxiously. Mrs. Miller, aren't you staying to take care of Professor Miller? I held up the divorce certificate divorce papers in my hand. No, we're going our separate ways now. I'm not your Mrs. Miller anymore. If anything else happens to Robert Miller, don't come looking for me. To my surprise, the first thing Robert Miller did after waking up was threaten suicide and demand to see me. Michael called me while I was in my flower arrangement class. Hearing this, I sighed, but still decided to go and see him one last time. Some things needed to be said clearly in the end. Seeing me, Robert Miller tried to please me by handing me a portion of my favorite snack, comfort food. Sarah, I bought you your favorite snack. I looked down at the snack and smiled. Robert Miller, you know what? This was Sarah's favorite thing to eat when she was 25. But 55-year-old Sarah stopped eating it a long time ago. His face went pale, and he forced a smile. But I remember you used to love it so much. You could eat it every day and never get tired of it. Yes. But ever since I developed a stomach condition at 30 that acted up whenever I ate this, I haven't eaten it again. A full 25 years, and he never even noticed. He awkwardly put the snack aside. He looked at me cautiously and asked, I heard you rushed to the hospital as soon as something happened to me and even left money for Michael. You still care about me deep down, don't you? I shook my head. Robert Miller. We lived together for 30 years. That was just my last act of concern for you as a relative. Hearing this, he still wasn't ready to give up. Sarah, you used to love me so much. How can you just stop loving me like that? I've thought things through these past few days. The person I've loved all along is you. Eleanor was just my obsession. I shook my head. Robert Miller, you don't love anyone. You only love yourself. Everything that happened clearly proves you didn't love me. You didn't love Jessica Davis either. You just lusted after her young body. You didn't even love Eleanor, otherwise you wouldn't have let another woman defile the love between you. Robert Miller, this is the last time I'm coming to see you. Don't disturb my life anymore. After saying that, I turned and left. Behind me, Robert Miller was already sobbing uncontrollably. After Sarah left, I kept thinking about what she said. Eleanor was my first love. After she died from illness, I thought I would never marry in this life. Until I met Sarah. She was wearing a simply styled dress. Her long, silky hair was braided into a thick plait that hung down in front of her chest. Without makeup, she was beautiful, radiant, and confident. When she blushed and tugged at my sleeve, calling me Professor Miller, I knew she was completely smitten. For decades of marriage, I pathologically suppressed her confidence until the light in her eyes was gone. I secretly rejoiced, knowing she could never leave me now. When Jessica Davis got into my bed, I had hesitated, but she looked so much like Eleanor, especially when she lowered her head and said tearfully that it was her first time. I felt a stirring I hadn't felt in a very long time, but what I didn't expect was, when I brought Jessica Davis home, Sarah, who had always been so meek and mild, would leave me so resolutely. She left with her suitcase and said she wanted a divorce, but I was still convinced she would come back in a few days. After all, before, if I didn't talk to her for more than an hour, she would come to me with red eyes, apologize, and say she would definitely change. Even if she really moved out, I still thought she was just throwing a tantrum with me. And if I humbled myself and coaxed her a little, she would smile at me with crescent eyes, just like before. But she didn't just not come back. She went further and further away. New suitors even appeared by her side. Only then did I realize I had never truly understood her. When she loved me, I was her deity. When she didn't love me, in her eyes, I was nothing but trash. She had become the radiant self she used to be. Sadly, she would never belong to me again. When I got home, Daniel had already cooked a full table of my favorite dishes. He had even opened a bottle of red wine to celebrate my newfound freedom. During dinner, he drank a lot and looked at me, hesitating to speak several times. I put down my chopsticks and sighed. Just say whatever's on your mind. He took a few deep breaths. Sis, my mom is forcing me to go home for a blind date. She's not well, and my dad said if I don't go back to the family home soon, I might not see her again. You're not a kid anymore. You should indeed get married, I said with a smile. He ran a hand through his hair dejectedly, then suddenly grabbed my hand as if having made a decision. Sis, I've confessed my feelings to you for the 9th time. Do you really not feel anything for me at all? As long as you say you feel even a little something for me, I'll stay for you. I looked him calmly in the eyes and said frankly, I don't like you at all, Daniel. No matter what you do, I won't like you. His eyes instantly turned red, and then he laughed loudly, trying to cover it up. Well, I've made a fool of myself again. Never mind, sis. Let's drink until we drop tonight. He drank the entire bottle of red wine, crying as he did, until he passed out drunk on the sofa. I covered him with a light blanket and sat beside him all night. Just before dawn, I gently kissed the side of his face. Silly boy. How sad your mother would be if she knew you were pursuing a woman her age. Before he woke up, I went back to my bedroom and locked the door from the inside. No matter how much he knocked after he woke up, I pretended not to hear. When it finally became quiet outside, I leaned against the wall and shed a tear. Love is about fulfilling others and also about restraint. Daniel didn't understand, but I couldn't pretend not to when I knew exactly what was happening. Later, I filled the house with flowers, got a Persian cat, and lived out my later years beautifully, all by myself.